everyone, I'm Hayley and this is Georgia MacNevin, one of our psychologists at STNA Psychology. Today we are going to be role-playing a video on understanding emotions where Georgia will play the psychologist and I will play her client. Thanks for joining me, Georgia.
Thank you.
Sometimes I feel like it would be easier if I didn't have to feel my emotions. I just don't understand why I feel so much pain and suffering and why I have to feel them. Why do we have to feel emotions?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It can be really hard to experience difficult emotions like shame, anger, fear, and these can be really unpleasant experiences at times. So I understand why you'd ask that question. A lot of people often ask, is there a way that I can switch my emotions off? And I'm wondering if that's something you would want to do.
Definitely. It would be so much easier if I could just shut off the feelings so that I didn't have to feel any pain.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so many clients come to session asking, how can you get rid of this feeling for me or stop me from feeling these things? And the truth of it is that we can't, and that all of our emotions serve really important functions for us, and we need them to survive in the world, and there isn't actually a way that we can sever them off or completely get rid of them. So the second sort of best solution to that, I guess, is learning to understand why we experience emotions, and with that understanding we can start to appreciate them, and value them, and realize how important they are to us and our functioning as human beings.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Yeah, it sounds good. So why do we need to feel emotions?
So there's three main sort of overarching key things that emotions do for us. The first is that they communicate to other people and influence our environment. So they tell people about what's going on for us quite quickly. The second is that they motivate us for action very quickly, and this is a lot faster. It bypasses the thinking processes. And the third reason is that they communicate really important information to ourselves. So I want to spend some time just unpacking these a little bit and giving some examples so that we can understand those a bit better. So the first one, emotions communicate to other people what's going on for us. So when you're feeling a certain emotion, let's say sadness, without telling me that you're feeling sad, what would I notice? What would your posture look like, or your face?
My body language, I guess. I'd probably be like, have a sad kind of face, and I might be a little bit slumped like this.
And so when you say a sad face, I can see that your eyes are looking down. And what's your mouth doing?
Probably drooping a bit.
Yeah, drooping a bit. Yeah, pursed lips.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when someone's experiencing sadness and they're, leaning over, their eyes are downturned. I mean, often when people are feeling sadness, they might be teary, so their eyes might be watery. They're often not speaking very much as well, so they might be quiet, withdrawn, removed. So all of these embodiments of sadness are going to be communicated to others. And let's say you were to see someone, say you saw me at work one day, and I was, maybe I had my head in my hand and I was looking down and I was a bit teary in the eyes and slumped over. What would you be motivated to do if you saw me like that?
I'd want to come over and see if you're okay.
Yeah, so you'd be motivated to come in and check in and see how I was going and if I was okay.
Yeah.
So there's a really important communication happening there without me having to tell Hayley, hey, I'm having a really hard day. Could you come and give me a hand or check in with me? You can notice by the body language and the expressions that I actually might need you to come over and check in with me and see how I'm going. Yeah. On the counter side, let's use anger for a minute. So let's say you're feeling really angry. What might I notice? What body language might you be showing?
I'd probably be more tense and kind of rigid and uptight, and
Yep.
might kind of, I don't know, wrinkle my brow and
Yep,
my
your
forehead a
forehead.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of,
Yeah.
maybe purse my lips a bit again as well, but a
Yep.
bit more aggressively.
Yeah, so there's pursed lips,
Mm.
the tension, the brow. I noticed you kind of moving around like you might have been a bit more agitated, whereas the sadness was stiller.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just that feeling of like frustration, I guess. Yeah.
Do you think you'd be making eye contact with me or avoiding it?
Probably avoiding.
Yeah, most likely avoiding. When, you know, someone's experiencing anger, often they are, you know, not looking us in the eye, they've got that tension and maybe huffing around a little bit. So let's say, for instance, you come into work one day and I'm expressing that anger, I'm tense, I'm not making eye contact, I'm moving quickly. What are you going to be motivated to do?
I'd probably steer clear of you a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, you might give me some space. Yeah, you might recognise, okay, you know, Georgia might be a little bit upset or angry today, or there might be something going on for her. I'm just going to give her a little bit of space, you know, for her to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's some common things that we'll do when we notice someone's expressing a certain emotion. Now, because of your learning history or certain relationships or the way that you relate, you might do different things to these. So these are just common ways that we might act when we notice that emotion being communicated non-verbally. One thing, you know, as well here is that often we aren't in control of being able to shut off that non-verbal communication. So even if we are trying to regulate ourselves when we are experiencing an emotion, that's likely to still get communicated across to other people in our environment. And it's good to just be aware of this. Let's say you're a person that if you are feeling sad, you don't like people approaching you, we need to understand that when they do see you being sad, they are likely to approach, and then you might need to have a conversation with them about, hey, I'd actually like some space when I'm feeling this way. So it can help us learn, you know, why people do that, or might not be doing the things that we'd like them to do. I know often I might have a client who, when they have a fight with their partner, they're expressing anger, and they're upset that their partner's not coming to check in with them and see that they're okay. And yet, when someone's expressing anger, we often we give them a little bit of space. Yeah.
I guess we're not mind readers, are we?
Yeah, we're not mind readers. So does that make sense, why emotions communicate to other people and influence our environment?
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Can you see why it's helpful that communication is happening?
Yeah.
It's like a little alarm bell that can go off and tune other people in to know that someone else is in an emotion, that they might need something, or it can motivate our action. So let's move on to the second one then. Emotions motivate us to action. So when we're feeling a certain emotion, we're going to be motivated to take action, and it's often very quickly, this motivation. And it's very quick because it needs to be, to keep us safe and to help us survive. And often this motivation will happen without us even thinking about what's going on. We'll be doing the action, it'll be emotion action before we've had a chance to really think about it and process what's going on. An example of this is, let's say, you know, you go out for your lunch break and you're stepping to cross the road and you hear a beeping noise. And very quickly, you're likely to shoot your head up and look around and jump back off the road really quickly.
Yeah.
Even if that beeping noise didn't have anything to do with the car being near you, the fact that it could have been, and that noise set off that fear and that anxiety and that alarm system, and you jumped out of the way to keep yourself safe. Yeah? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
So if we didn't have that emotion reaction, you know, we heard the beep, we had to process and use our mind. Oh, there might be a car. Beep means car. Looking up. Or is there a car? Is there danger? And it'd be too slow. By the time we'd stepped out of the way and recognised danger, we might still be, we might be in harm's way. So these shortcuts motivate us, you know, to action really quickly.
Yeah.
There's also instances where, let's say, there was a situation where you're being chased by a lion, or some kind of animal, some kind of threat. particularly, soldiers in war-torn areas, where when they're under that threat and they've got this surge of strong emotions, they're actually able to do amazing feats, run for, way longer than they'd be able to run normally, often with injuries that, those emotions are blocking out the plane at that time. And so they're able to, jump over things that maybe they wouldn't usually be able to do. Those emotions can fuel us to those actions where we can do these really quite amazing things. Another example of this that's a bit more subtle, if we look at the motivation of, say, when we do something that leads us to feel shame, some kind of action, we'd be motivated quite quickly to hide that. And this is a pro-social behaviour. We often hide things that might lead us to be excluded from groups. Right. And that will normally happen quite quickly too. It doesn't mean that we should listen to these things. It's good to step in and be mindful of these automatic reactions so we can choose whether or not we want to act on them. They're not always right, but they are in place because we evolved to have these emotions to keep us safe and to look after us in these different situations. Do you have any questions about that one?
No, it makes sense. But I guess what you were saying before about the example of stepping out and a car driving past, it kind of. So what I'm understanding is that that emotion is faster than our thought processes. So it's there to protect us and keep us safe. Is that right?
They're to serve different functions like keeping us safe. Yeah. So the third one that we've got is emotions communicate not only to others, but they also communicate things to ourselves. So they're communicating things to us about our environment, and also things about how we are, and how we respond in different situations. So the example that we used earlier about shame, if we've acted in a way and then that we feel shame about, and we're experiencing that, and we've got that urge to hide or withdraw, it's communicating to us that, hey, we need to be aware of our social environment right now, and we need to check out, is this a safe thing to share or not to share, particularly in this particular social group. So, there may be things that are appropriate to share with your friends, but not with your family, or with your family and not with your friends, or perhaps not appropriate to share in work contexts and things like this. So there'll be different areas, and that shame will help motivate us to know and give us information about, to check that out, and to use our minds at that stage to go check that out. And another one is sadness. So sadness is often about loss. So when we experience sadness, it's communicating to us that we valued something that we lost. So let's say you lose your job and you feel sad. That would communicate to you that you valued your job. In the same way that when we lose a loved one and we feel sadness and grief, it's communicating to us the value that person held in our life, which is often quite a big one when we lose someone close to us. And so without that experience of sadness or grief, and we wouldn't be able to value things in the same way. So really important communicator. Now, I want to be really clear that often these emotions that we experience may be triggered by the environment, but they can actually be coming from internal processes too. So different beliefs or ways of thinking, or expectations that we've had. So sometimes there's an external trigger and sometimes there's an internal trigger for an emotion. And emotions can also be a combination of the two. So say we're in a situation, maybe we're going to a party, and then most people could be excited about that, could be scared about that. You could have lots of different emotional reactions to a party, but depending on your internal processes and the way that you interact with that situation, it will elicit a different set of emotions.
Mm.
So let's say, for instance, you've got a history of feeling left out and excluded, and you're going to a party, and you experience fear that's triggered by an internal processing of thoughts like, oh my God, I'm going to be left out. What if people don't talk to me? Am I going to be able to cope? So it's that interaction of the situation and our internal processes. Now, while emotions communicate really important things to us, we do need to be mindful and careful that we don't assume that emotions are facts. So just because you're scared of going to a party doesn't mean that you shouldn't go. Doesn't mean that you should act based on that emotion. Now, there are some emotions we should act on, and there are some that we shouldn't, and that we should do the opposite to, so that we can learn and grow. And there may be parties where you felt fear where you shouldn't go as well. So it's not a clean thing, but we need to learn the skills to be able to identify the difference between our emotions, the situations, and what's going on for us internally, so that we can figure out how we actually best want to move. What's the most effective, workable way for us to move forward, so that we can live good lives in the long run. So these emotions in this way communicate something else to us as well. Yeah, so an emotion could be communicating to us that we are a little socially anxious, and that might be something that we want to work on. It could be communicating to us that, let's say you have an altercation with a friend, and you need to repair that, and you feel shame and resistance to that, and a lot of anxiety, fear about talking to that person. Well, that'd tell you some information about yourself, that stepping back into a relationship to repair and work on that is something that's difficult for you, and something that you might want to work on. So even when our emotions aren't necessarily fitting facts in the situation, they're still going to be communicating important information to us about ourselves and things that we might want to work on. Thanks, Hayley.
Thanks, Georgia.
All right.